Hello, my name is Brad Schwartz, and this is my presentation on Mars colonization. So my presentation is going to focus on a certain proposal by Mars One, which is a non-profit group based in the Netherlands, and they're planning to have men on the Mars by 2023. In the meantime, they're sending a communication satellite in 2016, a planetary rover in 2018, and a settlement components in 2020. And then in the fall of 2022, the first crew will depart from Mars, and they are not planning to finance a return trip. So first of all, who will be going? Mars One plans to use volunteers as the astronauts, and in their studies, 7% of people are willing to go even with no return trip planned. So it doesn't seem like volunteers will be a problem. They turn it into a reality show in order to choose which of group of 4 will go first, and then ensuing groups of 4 will go every 2 years. And the reality show will also choose the people to go in to be in the groups of 4 that will then go in order. And then who is paying? And this is not a government program, so it's privately financed. Mars One plans to finance it through media coverage of the reality television show, as well as through donations and sponsorships. And then many aerospace companies worldwide have already expressed interest in designing the various components for the mission. So now I'm going to cut to a video which talks a little bit more about the Mars One plan.
Mars One will establish human settlement on Mars in 2023. In that year, the first group of 4 humans will land on Mars. Every 2 years after that, another group will join the settlement.
My first impression was that this is an extraordinary project by people with vision, imagination. But my first reaction was, I think like anyone who will be confronted with such an idea, this will never work. But now look and listen more closely. This is really something that can be achieved. I think this might become a most spectacular media event ever, watched by everyone on the globe.
1972 was the last time that humans walked on the moon. No human has ever gone as far as Mars. Mars One has designed a mission that is much simpler than previous designs for Mars missions. The most significant simplification is that the crew is actually going to stay and live on Mars with the intention to remain there for the rest of their lives.
We will finance this mission by creating the biggest media event ever around it. Everybody in the world can see everything that will happen in the preparations and on Mars.
This is going to be a media spectacle. Big Brother will pale in comparison. The whole world will be watching and experience this journey.
Mars One paid visits to major aerospace companies around the world. In these meetings, they confirmed to us that they can supply the required equipment. For every component, we have at least one potential supplier. All these suppliers have written letters of interest for Mars One.
As for financing, this is going to be a private enterprise. Only private firms are going to contribute. No political mumbo-jumbo, no taxpayers' money will be involved. Only people like myself and many others who are enthusiastic about the program will contribute.
This is the plan. In 2016, a communication satellite and a supply mission will be sent to Mars. In 2018, a large planetary rover will be sent to Mars. It will drive around on Mars to find the best location for the settlement.
In 2020, living units, life support units, a rover, and more supplies will be sent to Mars. The rovers will prepare the settlement for human arrival. They will extract the inflatable section from the living unit. The life support unit will prepare the outpost for arrival of the humans. The crew will depart in September 2022, when the settlement is fully operational and habitable. They will be flying to Mars in a transit habitat, with a lander attached to it.
7 months later, in April 2023, the humans will land on Mars, the next giant leap for mankind.
This project seems to be the only way to fulfill humanity's dream to explore outer space. It is going to be an exciting experiment. Let's get started.
Mars One invites you to join us in this great adventure. For more information, visit mars-one.com.
So now that we've talked about the proposal, I think it's time we talk about some potential unintended consequences. The first is an introduction of Earth species. So it's already been proven that some species of lichen and cyanobacteria can survive and reproduce in Mars-like conditions, and inevitably some could attach to a spaceship on a journey to Mars, which could destroy the pristine state of the planet and make it impossible for us to ever truly discover whether there was life on Mars at any point. A second could be that we don't know enough about the effects of solar radiation there and the lack of gravity on health. Solar radiation can get in much larger doses because they don't have an Earth-like atmosphere. And there's also the opportunity cost of resources redirected from other things to colonization. I think that's more applicable if the government was funding this, but it still applies because a lot of money still does go into it, and it could go into humanitarian efforts or environmental efforts which could benefit humanity more directly. And then there's the issue of terraforming the planet, which most people are proponents of when they talk about colonizing Mars, and that could have many impacts that we do not know about because of the fact that we've never dramatically altered the physique of a planet before. So now I'm going to cut to a video which talks a little bit about how we might terraform Mars, and I want you to think about how that could go wrong and what we might not know about doing it.
Let's be blunt. It will take centuries to terraform Mars. Mars is a gigantic planet, roughly on the order of half the size of the planet Earth. The key is not to bring pumps to the planet Mars because it costs too much money. The way to do it is to take advantage of Mars's own topology, geography, and nature. Beneath the surface of Mars is lots of carbon dioxide. If you could heat up the planet a little bit, that will release carbon dioxide and initiate a greenhouse effect, which will then melt more ice and let more carbon dioxide come up. So in other words, you have an autocatalytic effect. You just have to jumpstart it. Once you jumpstart it, more carbon dioxide creates more temperature, heats up the planet, which releases more carbon dioxide. So then the question is, how do you jumpstart it? A number of mechanisms have been proposed. Greenhouse effects, hydrogen bombs, nuclear power plants, to raise the temperature of Mars a little bit, and that will then set off a chain reaction, releasing even more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's the cheapest way to take advantage of the carbon dioxide that already exists, rather than hauling pumps and generators from the Earth to Mars.
So now that we've talked a little bit about unintended consequences, I think it's time we talk a little bit about fairness of this mission. And it's hard to say who would benefit most from the mission, but a good analogy could be to the colonization of the Americas. The wealthy of Europe gained the most by investing in the missions and gaining money and gold in return, and the people who were harmed the most were the indigenous people and the colonists. And there's no indigenous people that we know of living on Mars, but the colonists for certain would have a very hard life. They'd never get to see their families again, etc., etc. So I'd definitely say, even though they volunteered for the mission, they would be most harmed by it. So in this instance, it will be a private non-profit group pushing the effort to colonize Mars, and the public and the government will not necessarily have a voice in deciding whether it goes through or not. So this is a mankind decision whether we should be colonizing Mars, and yet only this one company is getting the decision whether we should or not. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the barriers standing in the way of colonizing Mars. One is that there's significant differences between Mars and Earth physically. For example, Mars is around -10 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, so much colder than Earth, more similar to Antarctica actually. There's frequent sandstorms that blow across the planet. There's no comparable Earth-like atmosphere, and there's less gravity. And then another barrier is that the government has stopped funding it, so it's been forced to go private, although Mars One doesn't seem to find this as big of a problem. And then there's also resistance from some people who bring up the unintended consequences that could happen and say we need to take it slower or not go at all. So now I'm going to take a stance and talk about whether I personally think that the innovation is too fast or too slow. And I personally think the Mars mission is moving a tad too fast for a few reasons. Number one, there's no return trip planned. I think it is inhumane to send humans on a trip where they will never see civilization again, even if they are volunteers. There are also many potential unintended consequences which we know relatively little about. A good example from Professor Woodhouse's book is the speed with which nuclear power plants were built/integrated. In America, precautions were in effect, so the consequences of Chernobyl's failure were mitigated, but in Japan during the earthquake and tsunami, precautions were absent. In my opinion, this mission is like the nuclear power plants in Japan and lacks precautionary measures. And it would not lead to good, safe, smart, intelligent trial and error learning. And then here is my bibliography, and thank you so much for watching.